Hey, did that go live? Okay, so I'm going live in a sec.
Who's that man with the three-piece suit? Making a dough with the log and fruit. Who's that man with the 8 strong legs? Tried to make me breakfast, but it broke my eggs. Nobody suspects a thing.
All right, so we have a special guest tonight. I would like to welcome to the stream Phil Tibitoski from Young Horses Games.
Hey, hey, how's it going?
How are you doing? So, we have a good, 500-ish viewers, and we streamed Octodad over the last couple days. Everyone enjoyed it very much so. So,
Cool.
yeah. So, first question: in 8 words or less, now that Octodad has been released, how do you feel?
Pretty normal.
Pretty normal.
It's weird because you're kind of hyping the release for yourself for quite a long time, or at least looking forward to it a lot and thinking it's going to be like a giant event.
Right.
And that first day was like the first day it was out was pretty crazy, just as far as how busy we were and just being able to see everybody's reactions to it fully for the first time and things like that. But now we're just kind of back into the grind of like fixing bugs and updating the game and figuring out what we're going to do next, that sort of thing. So it kind of calmed down faster than I expected.
Right, so kind of life as always at this point. It's just that release day must have been nuts. I can't even imagine what that must feel like. I mean, you were working on Octodad, at least Deadliest Catch, for what, about 2 years since the original one came out?
Yeah, like 2.5, something like that.
2.5 years. That's amazing, and it turned out really well, I think. Give me 1 sec. I'm just gonna add the screen region of the game so I can play along. All right. Well, that was not quite. Oh well, man, I totally lost my train of thought. So, man, some people are having Twitch problems in the chat. Okay. All right. So let's talk about a couple of important things right off the bat. I understand you have a pug.
I do. I have a pug, and I also have a pit bull.
And a pit bull. Oh, I didn't know about the pit bull. I knew about the pug. I've seen the pug in a couple
Yeah, the
spots.
pit bull isn't as photogenic, I guess, but
That's okay. Are there any references to either of them in Octodad?
sadly, no. I mean, I pushed for artist Chris to put a dog in at some point, but it just never really happened.
Well, that's
Apparently,
a bummer.
4-limbed animals are difficult to animate.
Yeah, just 8 limbs is.
Yeah. Well, that's easy.
Yeah, that's no problem. But 4 is too
There's
tricky.
just like, yeah, I mean, there's just like a weird space between 2 and 8.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
Right.
It's difficult.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, that actually reminds me. I was gonna save user questions till the end for the end because we got a whole bunch of user questions, a lot of great ones. But I guess this one's kind of related. Let's see. Grilled Yakisoba from our chat asked, "Are octopuses your favorite animal, or did it just work with the controls instead of, say, a corgi?"
I don't know if a corgi would have ever worked, but
A bit too short and stubby, I think.
yeah. I mean, it's just not quite as wiggly of an animal. I mean, for us, it was the way it started out was like the original demo prototype was an arm that was made out of a bunch of like physics spheres tied together using constraints, and then you were just kind of like on this countertop and trying to like knock things into a sink or like trying to wrap around them and grab them, that sort of thing.
Right.
And from the beginning, it was always like the whole idea behind the game was micromanaging your movements and making something purposely difficult that would otherwise be, pretty easy. So there was never really any other animals in contending for the spot of what it would be. My favorite animal is penguins, but really doesn't have anything to do with the game.
Not quite. but that's okay. And I mean, I guess I'm gonna be burning through these user questions because again, this one's kind of related. We have a user in a chat named Mr. Squidon who asked, when is the superior Squid edition of Octodad coming out?
The Dadfinitive edition, or whatever?
The Dadfinitive game of the year, all years, Squid edition.
Well, I mean, right now we're actually working on some updates to some design stuff, and then just fixing bugs and kind of smoothing out some difficulty spikes. Because like later on in the game, at least for people who have like just started playing, it seems like they run into some issues with like the cafeteria area, which is pretty difficult if you haven't played before. And it's just been kind of hard for us to see those things before release because, you know, we've been playing the game for 3 years or more.
You've had so much more time to get used to it that just must seem like second nature controlling Octodad at this point.
And so we started to like, we watch as many Let's Plays and streams and stuff like that as possible. And, you know, been listening to a lot of the feedback on the Steam forums and just trying to figure out like where we can kind of smooth things over and get rid of unnecessary difficulty that's, you know, besides his controls.
Right, totally. And yeah, I remember seeing that mentioned in reviews a couple times, but I never thought it was as bad as a couple of them made it out to be. Like, the only part I really struggled all that much with was the part where you're climbing at the end of the world of Kelp, where you're climbing through that obstacle course. Just getting through that hole in the very final part, I had a little bit of trouble with that. But otherwise, I was pretty used to it, even with the cafeteria stuff. But
yeah, it's made it kind of difficult to figure out how hard things should be because some people don't have any trouble at all, and other people struggle like a lot.
Right.
And like the playtime is so variable depending on who you are and what kind of experience you have in games. Like for us, and for a lot of speedrunners, it seems like you can finish the game in like 30 minutes or less. But for other people, it takes them like 5 hours.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and it's kind of a delicate balance too, because when you think about it, part of the game's charm is the difficulty, like the fact that it's so difficult to control them and you're trying to fit in, but you need to balance that with the type of difficulty that people would perceive as, I guess, intrusive. Because obviously the difficulty is a huge part of the game's theme. You need it to be somewhat difficult, but if it's too easy, then I guess a lot of the humor would disappear because you would just be cruising through it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason behind some of those more harsh reviews is that they just didn't expect the game to get difficult in the way that a normal game would.
Right.
Which towards the end it sort of does start to get into that territory with the kind of like boss battle idea and things like that. But I don't know. For us, we were just kind of trying to prepare something that people who were good at the game could then, you know, be challenged by or enjoy, and also balancing it out with people who may not like that was kind of difficult.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. Let me just scroll up a little bit in my little interview document that I got going on. So, what are some of the surprises, or what are some of your favorite or surprising post-release comments that you've seen?
So I think there was one where a guy was trying to explain, like, so in the church you passed by a little while ago with that stained glass window, there's like a Cthulhu image in it. And
with
stuff
the bow
like
tie.
That. Right. I don't remember where the post was, but they were trying to describe like how the game fits into like a Lovecraftian mythos, and how like Octodad must be a like follower of Dagon or something like that, left behind after the war, like all this crazy stuff. Which I'm a huge Lovecraft fan, so I just thought that was really funny and cool because he got into like serious detail and like was describing all these like strings of logic of how this could be.
Wow.
Otherwise, I think our favorite stuff has just been like seeing families play together, or just like getting unsuspected fan art, whether it be visual or whatever. Someone made like an Octodad the musical like song, which was really nice, and
like one separate, not just like the theme song cover, but like an actual original song.
Right. Yeah, they wrote their own song, which was pretty amazing, and it was actually pretty good too.
Wow, that's awesome.
So that was cool. What else? The Video Games Awesome folks, when they played, they all made their own costumes of all of the characters from the game.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen some
It's
Octodad
crazy.
suits here or there, and I'm pretty sure, especially at this year's PAX East, that it's going to be a huge thing. It's
I
going to
hope
be a
so.
very popular cosplay, I imagine, and I can only imagine how people are going to have to adjust their normal mannerisms and their walking and stuff to try to match Octodad. Like, 'cause it's funny, the people who cosplayed Quap, it's still kind of derpy, but it's more manageable. Whereas Octodad's limbs and tentacles obviously just stretch in ways you can't even imagine.
Right.
So it's gonna be really funny to see those interpretations when PAX rolls around. Are you guys gonna be at PAX again?
Yeah, we'll be at East again, and we'll have booth and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll be there with both the Steam version and the PS4 version
Oh
finished. Or at least I hope.
yeah, yeah.
Because we're hoping to put the PS4 version out in March, but that's just kind of a target right now.
In March, gotcha. Yeah, March is it's gonna be a very interesting month. But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, maybe I'll see you at PAX because I will be covering PAX with Vinny or Vinesauce himself, I guess. Where we'll be going to PAX, so hopefully I'll get to meet you and
Cool.
shake your hand.
Yeah, we'll probably be in the Mega booth, so be sure to drop by.
Yeah, sounds good. So let's stray just a little bit away from Octodad for a second, just to have a change of pace. What are some of the games that you grew up with that you really love, like the games that define your, I guess, your time becoming a human being?
I always like this question's always kind of weird because it's a lot of people, at least my age, have the same games that do that. But I was a Genesis kid from the start. And I played like Kid Chameleon and Vector Man and things like that.
Right.
And Sonic, of course. But then, like, moving on, like, when I started wanting to really started wondering how games were made and things like that, I started to, I was playing Ocarina of Time and Halo, and I would, like, look through the credits and be like, programmers, what do they do? I wonder what that's about. I'm like,
what's all that about? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of what got me into wanting to make games.
Gotcha. Well, I was a Super Nintendo kid, so we're about ready to fight. But
I mean, I had one of those too, and or at least later on, I had one of those, and I liked what was it? That horrible Batman Forever game.
oh yeah, I actually know exactly what you're talking about with the grapple that comes out of his crotch.
Yeah.
That game, yeah. I actually played that one a lot too. That was interesting. Or here's one: which was better, Aladdin for the Super Nintendo or Aladdin for the Genesis?
I played it for Genesis. I played both that and Lion King for Genesis.
Oh,
But-
Lion King for Genesis. That game was brutal.
Yeah, those games are like super damn hard. Like it's crazy because people complain about games being hard now, and they're like super lenient and easy compared to back then. Most of the time, at least, unless you're playing Dark Souls or whatever.
Right. Which pretty much everyone these days are. So when is the Dark Souls edition of Octodad? Octodad 3 Dark Souls.
Oh,
like
man.
a roguelike.
We were talking about that the other day. If we made some like sort of orthographic roguelike with Octodad, it would just be horrifyingly difficult.
There's a guy who he adapts a lot of series into roguelikes, like very serious roguelikes, like the guy that made Doom RL, and and he made a Diablo roguelike, and he's talking about a Dark Souls roguelike. I wonder if he would do Octodad roguelike, because I would play it personally.
Well, I would love to see it. I hope he does.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how that would have to be adapted into
I
more
don't know.
traditional. Who knows? Who knows? So what was, growing up, you said it was around Ocarina time that you started to get into programming and wondering, like, what that whole thing was about. What was your first project, or the first thing that you really felt, I guess, not necessarily proud of, but the thing that you consider to be, like, your first thing that you developed or worked on as a programmer, I guess? What was your first thing?
As a programmer, I didn't even start programming until I started college, but I had messed around with like RPG Maker and some other things like that.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
Previously.
yeah.
And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out Blender so that I could make a skin for my like black and white monster. And it never really worked out because I was just awful at it, and I don't know, young and stupid, I guess. But I spent a lot of time messing around with mods and like downloading levels for different things and playing Quake and stuff like that. But
Gotcha. Let's see. So Yeah, very good stuff. So let's get back to Octodad a little bit. Let's talk about what your or not really expectations are, but what your hopes are. What's your kind of like your game designer like fantasy for Octodad? Like, what would make you happier than anyone to see Octodad? But like when it comes to like the community or sales or whatever it is, what's your game designer fantasy in regards to Octodad's release?
I mean, as far as sales go, we just want to make enough money to be able to continue to pay ourselves to make more games. I don't think any of us are like, you know, in it to get rich or something.
Yeah, I don't think joining... It's funny how many people get the misconception that it's a good idea to start making indie games in order to get rich.
Right, especially creating your own company and all that kind of stuff. Because if I wanted to get rich or something, I would just go program at like a software company.
Right.
Which you would get paid most likely a lot better. So.
Absolutely.
But as far as community, I don't know. I just want people to enjoy the game, and it's always nice to hear about it from like weird places that I don't have anything to do with. Like I'll talk. My mom will tell me like she was talking to some friend or something, and then their kid mentions it, and they're like, "Oh, you know, my son works on that," and that's always cool to hear. When it just has like nothing to do with like the gaming community, but like someone outside of it knows about it. That I feel like that's when you know it's kind of reached a good point, I guess.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So you decided to go to a school for game design, which is something that's interesting because it gets a lot of, I guess, mixed reactions from people like saying, oh, it's a waste of time, or oh, if it gets you the skills you need, then it can only be helpful, various things. I understand you went to DePaul, which, by the way, I am familiar with because I actually grew up in Naperville.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, that's besides the point. But anyway, so you decided to go to DePaul, and I understand that DePaul is more of a school that's based around getting a portfolio build. Is that correct? Like, it's less about just typical classes and more about getting projects that you can show people under your belt. Am I mistaken with that, or is that true?
I mean, once you get into the game dev classes, that's pretty accurate, but it's still like it's still a traditional 4-year school.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, I still took, you know, Calc 2 and a bunch of English classes and things like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's stuff that you absolutely have to in order just to get the skills that you need.
But besides that, like all the game-related classes are very project-oriented. So you usually come out of the class, each class with like a couple different small projects under your belt. So it's kind of, you get out of it what you put in, because I don't know, it's hard because you go to college basically to teach yourself how to learn. I feel like that was my goal, was like learning how to teach yourself things without having to have anyone else around, or do it for you or whatever.
Right.
So with games, at least, the best thing you could do, I feel like, and what I've seen from people who've gone for games, is to make them outside of classes in your own free time and actually have finished a project, because if you just do a bunch of small things that never really have any endpoint, they're not nearly as impressive as, you know, say making a game from start to finish.
Right, being able to show people that you have the competency and you understand what it takes to actually see a project through to completion.
Like, those are often much more impressive than any sort of grade point average or whatever.
Oh yeah, totally.
Because especially if you're going to like work at a big studio, they just want to see that you've made a really solid contribution to finishing a game, and, you know, better yet, if you've done it all on your own or whatever. So.
So. No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, it doesn't necessarily matter. Or, like, it doesn't have to be like a huge game, you know.
Right, just something to get
maker
experience.
Game or something.
Right. Like, the more you make, the better you'll get.
Right.
So just always be making things. So just out of curiosity, just so I can kind of poll chat a little bit, how many people here tonight were hoping to get into some kind of game design program at a school, or looking to get into that kind of field through a higher education? I'm just curious, and this is going to take like a good 30 seconds before we see these responses, because Twitch has been really awful with delay lately. But what kind of, and for those people who are about to respond, what pieces of advice would you give them? Like, what are the top things you would say?
So, myself included, a lot of people when they're getting into this sort of stuff or thinking about making games think that they can just have a bunch of really great ideas and then just like have people make them for them.
Right, like to not wear any real hats other than the idea maker.
Like there is no such thing as idea people, and you have to have marketable skills and be able to contribute a lot to what you're doing. And it's not always even just because that's what you need to make the game. It's because that's sometimes what you need to do to actually communicate your idea. Like you may need to prototype it for people to actually really understand what you're trying to do. And as far as designers go, going along with that, like you should at least have some sort of scripting skills or programming skills, because interfacing with other disciplines is really important, and being able to understand like limits and how difficult doing something simple can really be on the technical side, and vice versa. If you're a programmer, you should spend some time designing levels and things like that. So
just always have something that you can be improving, because really as a game designer, the more hats you wear, the better, I've heard.
Yeah. So, I mean, especially if you're independent like us, or you're a small studio, you have to do a lot of different things that you might not expect to have needed to do.
Good, and that brings me to my next question. What kind of things were you not necessarily unprepared, but things that you didn't expect that kind of cropped up? That was like, oh yeah, that's a thing, I have to do that. Like, what kind of things did you run into?
I mean, it's been a lot of it has been the business and legal and community management sort of stuff.
Right, the PR side of things.
Yeah, because I went for programming as far as school goes, and that's what I did throughout until Octodad, and well, actually through Octodad, because I was a programmer on the first Octodad game, and on this one, I've pretty much solely done like business and PR and marketing and legal and community management and all the miscellanea that you don't think is part of making a game, but really is. And so it's been interesting moving from being a programmer to being more of like an outward-facing part of the company, and then being our own company, in that we kind of decide how we do everything, and there's no one we really need to answer to but ourselves.
Right, that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about Octodad's development and design. So I know I was listening to the Big Sushi FM podcast in the car today, just kind of prepping for my own, seeing what kind of questions I can steal, and what things would be like horrible repeats that you have to answer all the time. But I did want to ask, as developers, or really any kind of creative role, like artists, musicians, developers, anything, where you're actually creating something, it's very easy to get obsessed or married with certain ideas or certain design choices. Were there any really hard ones that you liked a lot, that you were obsessed with, that the rest of the team was just like, that's not working, that you really had to struggle to let go?
Me personally,
or stories of others that had similar things where they were really like something, even though it obviously just wasn't working, and you had to kind of tell them, you have to get over it because this really isn't working out. I
mean, with the first game, so after the first game happened, a lot of us set our expectations a lot lower, or at least our expectations were high for ourselves as far as standards go, but we also were much better at managing our own scope as far as what we could do in this size game with our team and the skill set that we had and stuff like that. So with the first one, we wanted him to leave his house and go to all these places and go to this construction site, and there's this like giant overarching story, and it ended up being that we only had time to make like 3 or 4 rooms in his house, nowhere else. We didn't have that much dialogue. Our cutscenes were like MS Paint style, like
right.
Bad jokes that were done in the last 2 weeks. So I think just like realizing that you can't do everything you want to do is huge, and being able to manage that scope is like essential, because otherwise you're just going to get stuck making or working on something forever.
Yeah, like feature creep.
Right, and it's not even always like feature creep or adding things. It's more deciding when things are done.
Right, when deciding when the game has everything that it needs, and not like perpetually just adding more and more and more to it, I guess.
right? Not getting like obsessive about, you know, oh, this one challenge isn't perfect yet, and not everyone on the planet understands what they're doing here, because you're never going to be able to appeal to absolutely everyone with whatever it is you're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very true. Let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about Kickstarter. For those who did not know, Octodad was actually a result from a Kickstarter. It actually had a Kickstarter. It was just Octodad 2. And if I remember correctly, it came up right around the time, right before Broken Age or the Double Fine Adventure, like, made it huge and pretty much launched Kickstarter into the spotlight. Tell me a little bit about your experiences, I guess, being right before that mammoth of a thing. Do you wish it had happened a couple weeks later when Kickstarter was more well known, or just do you have any general thoughts about all of that?
Well, I think from the beginning, our goal with Kickstarter wasn't necessarily to make the amount of money we needed to, you know, fund all 8 or 9 of us to make the game. It was more so just like validation of figuring out if people would be willing to actually pay money for this. Because even though the first game got a lot of good attention with press and players and stuff like that, and it got downloaded a bunch of times, we still were very nervous as to whether people would want to ever spend money on this like silly octopus game.
Yeah.
And so Kickstarter for us was a lot about just like figuring that out and seeing if people would actually do that. And we figured if they would, you know, pay money to back the idea of a new Octodad, then they would more likely buy like the finished product.
Mm-hmm.
As far as going before Broken Age and Double Fine, I mean, at the time, obviously we didn't know that a bigger studio would even try this.
Right, like Double Fine.
Right, a lot of the only games I had seen on there were like Kentucky Route Zero, which is another Chicago game.
Right.
And some things like that. So for us, it was just kind of like, well, we want to be an independent developer, and we need to start business, but we need to cover some of these base costs and you know, figure out what the hell we're doing, really.
Right.
And it just also helps with coming up with like a solid deadline for figuring things out. Because if you give yourself like infinite room, infinite resources, infinite space, you're either going to never get anything done, or it's not going to be restrictive enough to cause something too creative to come out. Because people often think, or at least I found that people often think that if they had a bunch of money, they could create whatever they wanted.
Right.
But I feel like it's much more the opposite way around, that something special comes out of kind of dire circumstances rather than ideal ones.
Yeah, I mean, and we hear about stories like that all the time, you know, especially with Indie Game the Movie, talking about like the make or break feeling of Super Meat Boy. Did you guys ever get that feeling with Octodad at any point during the development, or did you kind of know that you'd at least, you know, it wouldn't be a total failure, you wouldn't like destroy your lives if it failed, because I mean, it already had a lot of hype. It's kind of like this, it's almost like a new mascot for indie games. Octodad's very recognizable. And it's kind of hard. It's at least it's hard for me to imagine Octodad being a total like, you know, life-shattering failure just because of how well received he was as a character before the game actually came out. So did you experience that kind of make it or break it feel, or did you feel fairly secure?
I mean, we weren't as poorly, I don't know, Team Meat and stuff like that. They were in much more difficult situations than I think we were in, just because during development, at least financially, because during development most of us still worked full-time jobs, which was straining emotionally and mentally and whatever, because you'd go and work 8 hours and then come home and work 4 or 5 more hours. But we also at least had money to pay rent and eat, that sort of thing. It was just a matter of like, are we going to make enough money to be able to quit those jobs and, you know, do only this? Because it kind of sucks to go to work and be like, this is not what I actually want to be doing. And then you come home and you're tired from work and you want to be doing what you love to do, but you're too tired.
Right. Yeah.
So with us, I mean, it always felt like, I don't know if this is going to really sell as well as we need it to. Maybe we'll make, because we throughout the project we logged our hours and basically said, okay, we're going to pay ourselves back this much because this is how much we're owed from working. And we always kind of thought that maybe we would at least make that back, but I don't know. We never really knew if we would make enough to make something else,
Right.
or if it would be received well enough for people to even want more games from us. And I mean, we're still kind of a little bit on the fence with that. I mean, it's sold pretty well so far, but we're not sure still if it's going to make enough for us to go then and like work for a year and a half or 2 years and make something new after.
Especially since Young Horses Studios is, I think, what, 8 people?
Yeah, we were 8 people for like 2 of the 2.5 years, and then we brought on another animator, Nick, who was actually on the first Octodad team. But instead of initially joining us, he had gone to work at Wide Load Studios.
Wide Load, what are they working on?
They worked on a couple Marvel games.
Oh, okay.
The Disney-owned studio.
Gotcha.
Here in Chicago. But then we got him back more recently, and he helped us finish out like the cutscenes and stuff like that. So otherwise, we were like, I don't know if we're gonna finish by January.
Right.
But luckily, we pulled him on, and we did. So yeah, now we're 9 people. So I mean, to pay people reasonably, and even for like a really small game with a low budget, you're talking, you know, $3 to $5 million for like 2 years of development. But Octodad, Deadliest Catch probably would cost around $1 million for what we did at the budget we did it at. So even a small game like this costs a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's phenomenal. Like, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's phenomenal. I just streamed Broken Age recently, and it's amazing how many people were like, "This was worth 3.3 million." Like, I think people just severely underestimate. Like what it takes, just like I guess financially and work-wise, to make a game of that production value. And Octodad, I mean, geez, this like fully 3D environment, it breaks one of the rules of your first indie game, which is do not make it in 3D because of how stressful it must be.
I mean, we'd all made smaller games and we'd made 3D games before, but it's just like, yeah, let's, you know, for our first game, make a giant physics sandbox in 3D with, you know, animations, AI, voiceovers, and fully 3D cutscenes. Good idea, right?
Right.
But yeah, with Double Fine and Broken Age, it's amazing what they did with the amount of money they got. I mean, it was amazing that they you know, raised it, but they all have families and other responsibilities, and they can't really avoid paying for things, whereas we're all a bunch of guys with no families and less responsibilities, and you know, maybe we have girlfriends or student loans or whatever, but it's still nothing compared to like having kids that you can't just like not feed your kids.
Yeah.
So
it's like, well, I gotta make some more video games. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry, Junior, I can't feed you tonight. Here's a very important question. Extremely important. Which do you prefer? Vlambeerios or Fractal Jacks?
Oh, that's hard. That's choosing between Rami and JW at Vlambeer and Richard at over at Phosphine Systems, who does Fract. But as far as the cereals go, I think I'd go with Vlambeerios just because I like spicy food.
There you go, perfect. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of spicy food as well. All right, let's see. So, a lot of things in the game you actually designed with speedrunning in mind, and that's very interesting to see. Because a lot of game designers don't consider speedrunning in their design philosophy. Do you think that, or how late in development cycle did the speedrunning aspects make it in, like the timer and like some of the level designs and some of the randomization that's in the game? How much did that, how late did that get added in, and how much extra work did you have to do to accommodate speedrunners?
I can't say as much for all the level designs, but I do know that throughout development, we just kind of, like, from playing the game a lot, found these kind of strategies to get through things quickly. And instead of, like, fixing them, we just kind of let them go, or we made it so that they were more easily available to people to try. Like, you can climb over the aisles in the grocery store, and you can, you know, you can get away with a lot of destruction, but it's funny how, like, careful people are. They're more careful than they actually need to be when they're playing, just through this like implicit, like they, I don't know. A lot of the times games only detect so much, you know, and they're only actually looking for certain things. But a lot of people think they're a lot more complex or deep than they actually are.
Right.
And it's funny because in the first game, suspicion wasn't even as big as it is now of a deal, and people would go into the kids' room and we just tell them, like, you know, your daughter's asleep, you know, be quiet, don't make any noise when you come out of the room. And we weren't detecting that at all. Like, we weren't doing anything to actually make you lose if you were too loud, but people would still like sneak out of that room and be super careful. And like one guy like knocked into a lamp and it was like teetering, and he's like yelling like for it to not fall.
Right.
So just kind of allowing those types of things to happen are a lot of what we look to do, and not trying to stifle them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really like those aspects. I'm actually very excited to see some of the speedrunners in this, to see what they come up with. And what you said earlier about how you noticed strategies that people could use, and you decided not to change them just for because they're more interesting than they are harmful. It reminds me of a quote from Chris Hecker from Spy Parties, basically saying that bugs plus player creativity equals feature.
Yeah, exactly.
So it turns out that I guess a lot of those things worked, which reminds me of another user question about the physics. Butts Machine. Wait, no. Well, that's the name of the viewer. There's a different one. Let me find it. Okay, Skeletor asked. Skeletor himself, by the way.
Oh, it's him.
About the physics engine. Was there more horror or hilarity during development, especially, I guess, early dev when you were getting everything on its feet, on its tentacles?
I mean, it's a bit of a mixture, really. We have a video up on our YouTube channel of like all the skinning issues having to do with Octodad's model and just like the horrifying things that produced. But I think anything we create is a little bit horrifying and a little bit hilarious. So,
I mean, they go hand in hand a lot of times. Absolutely. Good. So, I guess let's do something a little bit different. So, you've gotten a lot of fan art for your game, correct?
Yeah. A pretty sizable amount.
Pretty huge amount. I mean, and you saw the fan art that our viewers did that I tweeted you.
Yeah.
And so that was great. So, now I'm going to ask you to make fan art of your own game. Here's the catch. You have to do it in under 60 seconds. So, here's what I want you to do. I want you to open MS Paint.
Oh, I'm on Mac right now.
Oh, what's the Mac equivalent of MS Paint?
I have no idea. I guess. I don't know if this is going to work out.
Oh, no. It's so much fun.
Sorry, I've ruined your plans.
No. Oh, it's okay. But I've done that before, where I've asked someone to basically just draw, like I was going to say, draw Octodad in 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Go.
That would have not ended well anyways. I'm awful.
Well, that's half the fun.
Yeah.
But, that's okay. It was something that I thought I would try, but considering we don't have MS Paint, which is essential for this to work, that's okay. We don't have to do it. But, alright. Well, let's get to some viewer questions, shall we?
They're all saying I'm confirmed for Mac.
There you go. Well, actually, I find that a lot of developers use Mac because I mean, I'm not very savvy on programming or development, I guess. But I know, like, for example, like Tommy Reffinez from Team Meat uses Macs, and I think the reason he uses it is just because Mac is one of the few, or to get a MacBook it's one of the few things that actually has a really high screen resolution. It's so weird how many monitors these days cap themselves at 1080 because it's kind of become a standard, even though, like, you could do so much higher and fit so much more on the screen.
Yeah, at least for MacBooks, I just feel like they're built well and they're pretty, like, solid. Because I have Boot Camp on it, so I can switch to Windows anytime I want to, like, do anything else, or play a game that's not on Mac or whatever.
Right.
But
or
I
Wine
enjoy
Skin or whatever it is.
Right, but I enjoy OS X for like normal day-to-day email type stuff.
Yep, makes sense. Let me get through this little this section. Was it heavily debated about the inclusion of elements like little boss fights and stealth and racy type things? Were those debated in internally, I guess, at the studio? Like, should we include these kind of things, or should we let it strictly be about the physics and having fun with that? Whenever the player wants to move on, they can. Was there any debate about those aspects?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we spent a lot of time just wondering, like, what is an Octodad level, and what is, like, I don't know, how is this going to set itself apart from the previous game, and just do things, does this all fit, and is it cohesive, and does it make sense to do this? Is this going to be too difficult? Because, I mean, the game is, right now, much easier than it used to be. It took us a long time to kind of get it down to as easy as it is now, just because, like I mentioned before, just from playing it so much, it's kind of hard to see what is easy or difficult anymore. But we did, you know, like play tests every 2 weeks or so with friends, and then we also took it to DePaul actually and had students play test it and stuff like that as often as we could. So I think we did an alright job, but like a lot of people have pointed out, the end of the game kind of takes a more dramatic or difficult turn, which was always intended. Like, the story was always kind of pretty set. I just don't know if the way we presented it was the best way or not. But I mean, it seems like a lot of players really love it, and it's only from reviewers that we're getting such critical feelings towards it.
Right, and actually, and that's perfect. It brings me to another user question. It's funny, we're hitting all the user questions just through our normal talking. Fermenting Dregs wanted me to ask a bit about consumer reception versus critical reception. I guess the difference between the two, which one's more important to you, which one do you feel has more impact, things like that. How do you feel about consumer reception versus critic reception?
I mean, we're always making the games we do for players and for, you know, people who are a fan of Octodad or games like Octodad. And so it's not, when we're making it, we're not always thinking about, like, oh, I don't know how reviewers are going to take this. Is the game going to be easy enough for them to get through, and that sort of thing. We just kind of made the game we wanted to make, and that was it. But as far as reception, I mean, we're super happy with how people who are just, you know, consumers, or however you want to say it, are taking the game, because they seem to just enjoy the fun parts, and they seem to, you know, it's weird because there are people who like stuff that's like super hard, and there are people who hate it, so it's hard to, you can't please everybody. So I don't know. I do know that whenever we get kind of bummed over a review score or whatever it may be, we go and look at, like, our Steam forums or the Twitter search feed, that sort of stuff, to cheer ourselves up, because it's usually filled with people talking about how much they love the game, or how they played it a bunch, or how they're laughing about it. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone here loved the game. I didn't see really anything negative. Like, they're usually, because I play a lot of, I guess, like, niche, like, obscure indie shit. I'm kind of like the token indie guy of Vinesauce, and I see a lot of mixed responses for certain games, like especially ones that use pixel art, like Nuclear Throne or Anodyne or anything like that. But Octodad's kind of, at least to the from what I could tell, it was just overwhelmingly positive last night. So I guess I'm not really getting toward a question. I just wanted to inform you that our viewers were just thrilled by it and really, really loved it a lot.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, it's just been weird because we've never released a commercial game up until now, so this is kind of the first time we've come up against this many reviews from, I guess, bigger outlets and stuff like that, and just like seeing them impact things. Though I'm not quite sure they've impacted sales at all, because those have been good. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in the top sellers on the Steam list since release pretty consistently, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people will go and read like 3 or 4 reviews, and then they come to make their own decision. It's not just like, oh, this got this score, and so I will or will not buy it.
So you don't feel, so you definitely don't feel too much like a slave to the mainstream reviews, because you have faith that the consumers are going to largely decide for themselves at the end of the day, even though people do tend to obsess over like review scores and other bullshit like that. Yeah,
I just don't think we're the kind of studio who would then cater to those sorts of people. It's just kind of like, you like our game or you don't, and that's fine. Like, we've kind of just we're at peace with the fact that not everybody's going to like a game where the controls are like this, or that's cartoony or however you want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because some people like certain things, that's all they like, and that's all right.
Right. All right, let's get to some more user questions. I got a whole bunch written down here. Some of them are good, some of them are silly. You get the idea. I took almost all of them this time around, which is unusual. Usually I cull very selectively from the user questions, but I figured I would just let the floodgates open a little. So this one's from Eopiope. I have no idea how to pronounce that name. The question is, how can the chef see through Octodad's disguise? It's flawless.
Well, I mean, he's been working with fish for a really long time, and if you pay attention in the boat level in the story, he's actually run into Octodad before.
Right. It's almost a personal thing because he's the guy that got away, like the fish that got away all those years ago.
Exactly. It's a vendetta for sure.
Alright. Good. Let's see. How long did it take to develop? We hit that about 2 years. Or I guess if you're counting the original Octodad, that was more like 3.5 years, right?
Yeah, the first Octodad came out in November of 2010. So.
Mm-hmm. Alright, let's see. What advice we got into that? Okay, Blazing Raisins asked, what inspired the idea behind his character? Like, I'm sure you had, like, the tech demo at first, like, the physics and the tentacles and stuff, but did you know right from the bat that he was just going to be a dad trying to fit in, or did you go through any other character portraits before you hit that side of things?
Well, from the early beginning, it was an alien inside of this, like, android's head, controlling it with levers, sort of like Men in Black. And it was inspired by both being John Malkovich film and a game called Jurassic Park Trespasser.
Right, I remember reading about that, just it was such a glitchy mess that it was hilarious.
Right, and so we kind of wanted to harness that and make it, like, do it on purpose instead of on accident.
Totally.
And so we just kind of went forward with that, and then it was like, well, an alien, I don't know. And then we decided it was going to be an octopus, and then we eventually just decided to get rid of the whole, like, being in an android thing, because it would have been, at that point, it would have been, like, pretty rigid movements and stuff, and he would have still fallen over, and it might have been funny, but, like, a floppy octopus.
It would have been lovers and a dangerous octopus, basically.
Right. And so we just, like, then we're like, oh, I'll cut out the middleman and just put the octopus in the suit, because it's funny. And then pretty much all of our decisions from there on out have been like, is this funny? If it's funny, we're going to do it. There's not much reason as far as, like, logic that goes behind, like, how does he have children? Why do they not know? That sort of stuff.
Right. Like that's part of it. Like, why? I don't know. I can't. Has anyone read into that, like, way too seriously? Like, have you encountered anyone that's, like, I guess the Cthulhu thing was one side of it. But I guess the more obvious humor, I guess, is just lost on some people because they can't suspend a tiny bit of reality.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's been threads on the Steam forum about just, like, are those kids adopted? Did they kill their real father and, like, take his place? Like, really dark stuff has come up. It's been kind of interesting.
It's like, no, Octodad's it's a heartwarming story. Like, it's definitely full of contention and says a really surprising amount. And will touch a lot of people's hearts, but for the most part, it's a silly game. It's I don't know.
Right.
But, yeah. Question from Zambambo. How does Octodad get his pants on every morning? What's his process? Does he have a method worked out?
Well, I mean, it's like the rest of us in that it's one leg at a time, except he's got 2 legs in each of his pant legs.
Yeah, and it's funny, I did not notice that. Like, I didn't realize there were 2 legs in each pant leg until the section of the game where he loses a suit. I was like, oh! Like, I totally thought he was just missing limbs.
A couple of people love to point out stuff like that, or at least a lot of people do. They're always like, doesn't he only have 6 limbs? And then we're like, no, like, he's got 2 in each pant leg, 1 in each arm, sleeve, and then, his mustache.
His mustache that he has to trim.
Exactly, horrifying,
painful trimming. And it's great that you made a connection between that and that comic, because that was in a comic, correct?
Yeah, one of our one of our programmers, who's also an artist, Devin, made that comic. Because
Oh.
for a while during the beginning of Dahlia Sketches development, we had like a whole comic kind of series where every week we would have one.
Right. Are you
Oh,
watching the
oh.
stream right now? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I'm watching.
It's really funny. I got this blue one stuck way up there. Do you see it?
Oh, whoa. Yeah.
I gotta find a way up there now. But what was I gonna say? Oh, so that's kind of cool that you made a connection between that comic and the game when you had the wife mention, you have to trim your mustache again, and he like blubbers in pain. And only, I guess, like the joke is obvious, but the people who read the comic, I guess, got a little extra morsel there. So
yeah, we do a couple things like that where it's like, well, maybe one or two people would get this, but we'll still do it because we think it's funny.
Right, makes sense. Oh, I have an
You can
idea.
actually, you can grab one of the blue ones out of the current pots and move it.
Yeah. I just decided that right when you said that. So yeah. All right. Let's see. Dr. Wizard asks, inspiration for first Octodad game. Do you have anything else to say on that, or do you feel that would be redundant to address?
As far as the art style for that one went, we paid a lot of attention to like Ren and Stimpy, and Animaniacs, that sort of thing. Just in that, like, we always loved those like overly realistic frames that they would do. That were kind of horrifying in the midst of like this generally flat and simple style. So those took effect, and then I mean, just like, what was it, Tim Avery?
Tim
Or
Avery.
just like, yeah, like Warner Brothers cartoons, those sort of things.
Mm-hmm. Makes
Rock
sense.
of Modern Life.
Here's
a lot
a
of those like 90s cartoons.
right. Here's a question from someone in chat. Unless I'm mistaken, octopi only live for a little bit over a year. Were you aware of this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things about them. As they get older, they start to go insane and just kind of kill everyone around them.
Really?
Yeah, and as soon as the male mates, he dies usually. People were actually using that fact as a reason as to why he could not have actually had kids with Scarlet,
Oh my god.
because he would be dead.
That's really funny. I can't
Since
believe
Tommy and
that.
Stacy are 10 and 12, I think.
Oh my god. That's really incredible. I mean, I guess people will constantly surprise you.
Yeah.
With their knowledge and their willingness to relate to it with a humorous video game like this. But let's see. Butts Machine asked, which came first, the physics or the octopus?
The Octopus came first, and then we were trying to figure out how we were going to actually
Do the physics.
do the physics and simulate it, and like how it was going to control. Because for a while it was just like the kind of arms mode, and then we were like, well, maybe he should walk around, and then we prototyped that out separately, and it's like, oh, should you just like drag your legs and they come along with you? Should he like teeter-totter like a drunk person or something, and you have to like balance him?
Right.
And eventually we came upon this sort of like marionette style that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
And put the two together and decided instead of having like two separate modes and maybe doing one for each level, we would just do all of them at the same time.
Here's one that just came to my mind. Kind of a flavor question here. Tell me a fact about the Octodad expanded universe that you have never told anyone before.
Oh man. It'd be a good question for creative director Kevin. But
Or you could just make it up and we'll pretend it's canon for
yeah, I mean,
the
you
rest
could
of the
just leave
stream.
me. But I mean, the COD War, there's like a whole like total history to that, and it's actually based on a real war that was a fishing war between I don't know if it was the UK and Sweden or something.
Really?
That might not be right, but there's an actual COD War that this was based on.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my god. There's a lot that I was unaware
I mean, it
of.
wasn't much of a war really. It was just kind of like they meet in the middle of this like fishing area and be like, you know, this is actually ours now.
This is our territory,
this
like
is our
little
fishing
COD
territory.
gang wars.
Right.
Wow. Very, very interesting. So Octodad found himself in the middle of that experience. Now you got to make a sequel, or sorry, a prequel
Yeah.
that based more that I guess deals more with that side of it before he got onto that boat and assumed his current identity. You can call it Octodad Begins.
Oh, thanks.
There you go. I
Take
just gave you your next game, so you can we'll talk about rev share and royalties later on.
Yeah.
But all right, let's see. Lost Cosby asks, what do you think of GOG and the existence of DRM-free alternative for games? Do you have any specific opinions that you want to express about DRM-free services or just the availability of it?
I mean, we're happy to provide it. Obviously, we'd love to get paid for our work, but if people can't afford it or whatever, then we're not gonna hunt people down or anything, you know?
Right.
If they went and pirated it or whatever, that's up to them. I mean, I remember what it's like to be a teenager or whatever, or not have a job, or just be poor. So,
right.
Obviously, we're not too adamant about like preventing piracy since we put the game up DRM free.
Right, totally.
It's kind of an impossible thing to fight anyways. It's just not even worth trying.
Yeah, and I think as long as you treat, I mean, this is just my opinion, but as long as you treat your consumers with respect and I guess be real with them, and I think a lot of people will want to support you regardless. Like, the more you treat your players and consumers with respect, the more they'll want to support you. Obviously, that mentality won't reach someone who's not a fan. Like,
right.
Not like someone
but
who
they
knows
weren't going
your
to buy it
studio.
anyway, so why?
Right, they wouldn't have bought it regardless. So it's
Right.
better just to treat your consumers with respect and not try to fight them so hard about that, because if you do that, I think you're likely to have more success. I think Gabe Newell said something along those lines too. Like,
Yeah.
they just try to provide the best service they possibly can, and as a result, piracy is kind of a non-issue. I mean, I guess also massive Steam sales helps, but but yeah. All right, let's see. Another one from Lost Cosby, and this is one that I meant to ask and I forgot. What other indie devs do you respect a lot? Or studios, developers, or really any developers, not necessarily indie?
A lot of them. As far as independents go, I talk a lot with Rami Ishmael from Blombeer.
Right.
And I'm always kind of blown away by how many games they release in a year.
Oh my god, they're a factory.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just like their ability to pump out games, and they're good games, is wild. So them, as far as independents go, and I mean a bunch of others like Davey Redden, Stanley Parable.
Right.
Good friends with him, and he's just like a really interesting person in general.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of him. Like, just not only just from Stanley Parable, but from they did a very short-lived podcast for a bit called Playdate, and just from what I've seen on Twitter and interviews and stuff, he seems like a great guy.
Yeah, I could talk to him for hours. He's super smart. And then it's outside of indie, like for the longest time, I've been a huge fan of Bungie. Just for the way that they treat their communities well, and they always are very, very caring with how they create like their universes that surround their games. And then they've always just been super nice, and it didn't hurt that when we were in Seattle for PAX, they let us come by for a tour of the studio, which was like really crazy cool.
Oh wow, yeah, that must have been awesome.
So
yeah, very cool. Wonderful. Let's see. All right, this is from Peer Gaming. Could you and your crew imagine to expand the Octodad universe?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we have too many ideas, I would argue, as far as like what Octodad could do, where we could go, and the stories we could tell with him. It's just a matter of finding the right ones.
Mm-hmm. Right, makes sense. Sorry, go ahead.
I just should say, I guess we'd like to, though I think next we might do something completely different. Just to kind of take a break, because at this point we've been doing Octodad for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I could totally imagine. I would definitely be in the same boat. Is there anything that you can share with us in regards to future projects? Like any kind of, like, even if it's just as simple as like a genre that you want to explore, or any information about what you think is on the horizon for young horses. I just had a total brain fart, but
There's nothing incredibly specific yet, and it's not even because we have anything I don't want to say. It's we don't know. But
it's gonna be a Dark Souls like, right, with rogue elements.
I think people would be surprised with how different it is, though. I would wager a bet that it would be character based because it seems to be that's what we're best at. Is kind of like character based comedy, quirky sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Though I don't know what genre or anything like that. We've also talked about VR because we have an Oculus dev kit, and then we've also jokingly talked about doing like this sort of Buffy the Vampire Slayer themed high school RPG rhythm game.
Oh yeah, I think I heard about that somewhere, or maybe in another interview or something.
Yeah, we're basically just going to try to do the weirdest things we can think of is the goal.
I don't know if you want to write this down as a bug report or whatever, but I noticed that you can actually score on the basketball thing just by rubbing the ball up against the hoop vigorously.
Yeah, that's intended.
Okay.
It's funny because we put in for each of these games, there's like or at least for most of them, there's a way to cheat.
Right.
But then we were like reading reviews and people are being like, these arcade games are like impossible. And I'm like, you can literally like pick your feet up and get inside that basketball machine. There's nothing stopping you. And just,
right.
like,
Yeah.
the ball
I mean, people.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, have you found I mean, imagine it's very frustrating that some people just cannot think creatively or outside the box for a game like this.
Yeah, it seems like they just don't have lateral thinking, or they don't want to take the time, or what. I think with reviewers, it's more like they want to play through the game once and then write the review and move on to the next game, and so it's not like they have a lot of time to just kind of
that's true.
Sit around. But it's interesting because we put these things in purposely. Like with the fish toss, you can just like run in there and knock it all over. You don't have to throw the fish really if you don't want to.
Right.
But a lot of people will just sit there and try to do it the right way forever, and then get frustrated with themselves. And it's like, why didn't you like stop, think about it, and then try something different?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I liked the fish toss a lot. Like for some reason, I thought that was the most fun one, so I did that one legit. I felt it got me it got me much more control over his tentacle, because a lot of people, I guess, I imagine when they first try to control Octodad, even through the end of the game to some degree, they kind of just move their sticks in the general direction that they want the limb to go, when really it's better to think of it as one stick being one plane and the other being the other plane, and to control it like that. So the toss game got me really thinking about that. Like first I line it up on the plane, on one plane, and then I use the other stick to just do the forward momentum. So
I mean, that's basically what it is the left stick controls like X and Z axis, and then the right stick controls up and down. So,
but at the same time, I guess not everyone is like left-brained. So yeah, I can understand. Let's see. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, a lot of people don't seem to take the time to like learn how to be patient with themselves with it, which is interesting because a lot of the end game stuff is not necessarily about being fast, but about being like careful and patient with yourself.
Right.
Or even just like climbing Soda City Tower in the grocery store is more so about like being careful and slow than it is about like waving your legs all over the place.
Right. It's pretty much impossible if you just try to rush up it unless you have a lot of experience. You have to take your time. And I guess that part also is a good tutorial to teach players that Octodad's leg will stick wherever he places it, and you can use that to climb. Did you have to, how much time did you have to spend, I guess, designing sections to work as mini tutorials to teach the player things like that tower?
I mean, we went over the initial tutorial in the church. We iterated on that for a really, really long time to make sure that as soon as they got out of that room, they had a pretty solid idea of how to play the game. And then we knew, or we wanted throwing things to be a bigger part of this game than the first one. And so with like getting the tie down and stuff, we wanted people to learn how to throw the peasants at it. But some people still just crash into the window, which is fine because we let that happen too.
Right.
But yeah, you're right in that like Soda City is very much a like, okay, you're really not going to get up this unless you're careful and unless you do it consciously instead of just trying to like stumble up it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep, absolutely. Let's see. Are there any big secrets in the game that no one has found yet that you're like, oh man, I can't believe no one's found this? Like, did you put any really big Easter eggs that no one stumbled upon yet? I'm not sure how chock full of Easter eggs the game is. I just figured I would ask just in case, just to create a sense of intrigue, I guess.
I mean, a lot of the Easter egg type stuff is in the
the grocery store.
Although that's more so just like references than us trying to like hide things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a secret level, but people have found that.
Right.
I think at this point people have found all the ties and 100%ed everything, got all the achievements. A couple of those were a little bit obtuse for a while for people. I think they found... I mean, besides our own stupid in-jokes and stuff like that, I think they found everything.
Right.
And connected the dots. We never tried to be like a super, like, oh, we're going to spend months hiding these things. And
right,
no one's ever going to find it. Because
it's not Splunky.
Right. And it's also just like, well, everyone's going to find this stuff eventually, so I feel like why... I don't know, a lot of people find stuff like the first day, so why spend like months hiding it? We should just get this game out.
Yeah, and focus more on just making the core experience a good experience. Yeah,
right.
There's 2 more from Peer Gaming, and then that's probably gonna wrap up the interview because I want to go all night. I remember the first interview I did was with Chris Hecker, and we went for like 2.5, 3 hours. But so 2 more questions from Peer Gaming. One, how long did you experiment to find the perfect look and feel when you were working on, I guess, physics and aesthetic? How long did you spend just doing that aside from actually designing the levels and the core experience?
The feel of the game we've essentially been working on since May, like June or July of 2010.
Mm-hmm.
We've been working on the feel of the game since then. Essentially, because up until even release, we were changing little things about how he moves, and like a lot of the challenges will have specific like helper forces or things like that to help you through levels. Like this game is not nearly as hard as it would be if it was purely physics simulation.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of the times with staircases, specifically, there are forces that help your foot move up a little bit faster than it would have otherwise, and things like that. A lot of small things, or just like whether or not your arm should float in the air when you move it up or down, or if it should be continuously falling, or like towards the end of development was when we figured out the controller controls with having switching modes being like automatic instead of an active thing you had to do, which completely changed the game for the better, I think.
Right.
It's much easier than mouse controls where you have to consciously switch modes.
Right, yeah, totally.
Though with the mouse you can be more accurate, so it's kind of a trade-off. But I prefer controller. I use DualShock 4 usually when I play.
There you go. Or I guess sooner or later people will have the best of both worlds and they'll use a Steam controller.
Yeah.
Which I'm very interested in. I can't wait to use one. I mean, I don't really think one way or the other about Steam Machine itself, but the controller I'm very interested in, because I've always been kind of thinking for a long time how they're going to, I guess, bring the precision of keyboard and mouse to the living room, and I feel like Valve is definitely very forward-thinking with that, so it's cool to see. But anyway, I digress. So did you have any other projects, like any other little side things that you did just to retain your sanity during Octodad's development, or was it just Octodad all the time forever?
For myself, I helped do some of the PR for Samurai Gun.
Oh.
Because I'm still working for Max Temkin and Max Existentialism, and just like helping pay bills and stuff until we actually get the money from selling Octodad.
Right.
But I helped with that a little bit, and I mean, some of the other guys have done other side games or done like Ludum Dare or things like that.
Any ones that are really noteworthy that we would know?
There's a game. Do you remember the Adventure Time Game Jam that happened? Might have been a year ago or 2 years ago.
I do not.
So there was an Adventure Time game jam that was associated with Fantastic Arcade, which is this event in Austin every year. It's very like indie games centric. And Chris and Kevin from our team made a game called Batteries Not Included.
That sounds familiar.
Where you play as BMO, and you lost your batteries, and all you have is your plug, and so you can only like move a certain distance away from where you are, but you always have to be plugged into a wall, and you get like extra lengths of cord, and you have to like grow your cord as long as you can so that you can eventually find your batteries and unplug from the wall. But it's just like a little 2D pixel art game.
Yeah.
I liked that a lot. I thought that was really cool.
Awesome. I'll have to look into it. Here's a question that just hit me. Are you aware of this indie ragdoll kung fu type game called Tori Bash?
Yes.
So I was just doing this little spin dance that I like to do. I'm sure a lot of people like to do, where you just raise one leg and you go in circles, and it looks very graceful. Do you expect, or have you seen any, or have you been able to perform any cool Octodad type or Tori Bash type like gymnastics maneuvers using Octodad's physics?
I mean, I think we can do some stuff in there that I haven't seen a lot of people try. He can jump. Well, not jump, but like you
Launch
can
himself.
jump. Yeah, you can launch yourself, or you can jump gaps. If
Really?
you run in the air, like when there's a tie on top of the shed in the backyard, and the best way to get it is to like get up on top of the stairs of the slide next to it, and then jump from one to the other.
I'm very curious. Is it possible you could walk me through this real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I usually fling my legs, so like I would just like put one leg out there and then immediately move the next one, so it kind of latches on, almost like a grappling hook.
Okay. Huh. Interesting.
Because it'll keep you on, and your other leg may be hanging, but if you just pull it back up, you'll be good.
It's almost, I guess, how people normally traverse. It's like almost like mini hops rather than actual steps. Like if you do it at the right moment, I guess you get some airtime. Interesting, though. I'll have to experiment with that. Not quite. I'll get it eventually. But all right, last user question. Again from Peer Gaming. Oh wait, no. That was the last question about other projects, so I think we hit everything. So here's another request, since we couldn't do the MS Paint thing. I want you to say, "By Octodad, Dadliest Catch," in the Octodad voice. I know you weren't the voice actor, but...
Oh man, this is gonna be... Okay.
Extremely embarrassing, but it's okay. We will not judge you. I'll do it too, if you would like. We can say
Fine,
it at the same time.
You can judge me, it's alright. Tom might be listening right now, the voice actor, and he'll just shame me later, so it's fine.
There you go. There you go. Perfect.
Got it.
I love it. It was perfect. I understood it 100%.
Glad.
All right. Well, unless there's anything else you wanted to discuss, that you wanted to say to the 600-ish people watching, if there's anything at all, do you have anything?
Well, I mean, the game is still 20% off until Thursday. So if you were going to buy it, or if your friend was going to buy it, now would be the time, because it probably won't be on sale again for at least a few months.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. I mean, I loved Octodad. I think it's fantastic. It's definitely great to see it come out, because I know it's been hyped for a really long time, and it did not disappoint at all. I really liked it a lot, and thank you for making such a wonderful game and for coming to our stream and talking with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, so I'm going to say goodbye to you and thank you again in the Octodad voice.
Excellent. That was good.
There you go. Thank you very much. All right.
Thanks.
Well, thanks again for coming by, and I will catch you later, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Well, there you go. Phil Tibitoski from Young Horses Studios, developers of Octodad, Dadliest Catch. That was a lot of fun. He's a really, really fun dude. Really fun studio, and he made a really fun game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If anyone has any other questions, I could forward them his way, or you can tweet him at ptibs with a Z, or at Octodad Game on Twitter. And I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching.